A mother finally reconnects with her estranged daughter after years of painful silence. The daughter, hardened by misunderstandings and old wounds, returns home after struggling through life on her own, wanting to make things right. The mother opens her door and her heart, hoping this second chance will heal what time has broken. For a while, life feels tender and almost familiar again. The mother cooks her daughter's favorite meals, listens to her stories late into the night, and holds on to the hope that forgiveness might finally settle between them. But small changes begin to stir unease. The daughter whispers on the phone at night. She hides messages. Her tone shifts when she thinks her mother is not listening. The mother senses something dark threading through their fragile peace but pushes it aside, determined not to lose her daughter again. The truth shatters everything the day she accidentally sees a message on her daughter's phone. In it, her daughter tells someone that she is back home to ruin her mother slowly, to make her pay for a mistake she misunderstood, a mistake that had never been explained to her. The mother reads how her daughter plans to take her money, her reputation, her peace, and how she still believes her mother once betrayed her in an unforgivable way. Heartbroken, the mother realizes the reconciliation was never real. What follows is a quiet, painful unraveling of truth. She confronts her daughter, uncovers long-buried misunderstandings and lies fed by others, and watches as the community begins to see the daughter's deception. Through it all, the mother remains steady, choosing dignity over anger. As the truth becomes known, the daughter faces the consequences of her bitterness, and the mother begins the slow work of healing once more. In the end, the mother learns that forgiveness is not a doorway for others to harm her again, but a path she must walk for her own peace. She steps forward with strength, letting go of who her daughter used to be and finding comfort in the quiet spaces she rebuilds for herself. I knew something was wrong the moment I saw the look in my daughter's eyes. It was a quiet kind of darkness, the kind that sits behind a smile and waits for the right moment to show its teeth. That morning, sunlight was spilling across my kitchen floor, warm and gentle, touching everything except her. She stood there with her arms folded, her shoulders pulled tight, as if she were bracing against a storm only she could hear. And I remember thinking, in that soft, trembling place inside me, that maybe I had brought her home too quickly. Maybe forgiveness had made me careless. Because when a child walks back into your life after years of silence, you do not question the gift. You cup it like water in your hands, afraid that even breathing too deeply might make it slip through your fingers. When she first returned, I felt something inside me rise like hope. But on that morning, as the kettle hissed and the clock tapped its slow rhythm on the wall, I felt something else, something close to dread. Every instinct a mother grows from the first day she holds her child whispered to me that I needed to pay attention. Her voice, when she finally spoke, carried that familiar edge. Soft, controlled, but sharp in places where softness used to live. And even as I tried to steady myself, tried to be grateful she was home at all, a single thought cut through me like a cold wind. What if bringing her back meant opening the door to a hurt I was not ready for? I did not know then that the truth was already blooming behind my back. Not a truth spoken aloud, but written on a screen in the palm of her hand. A truth meant for someone else, but destined to break me first. That morning was the beginning. I just did not know it yet. Before all the trouble began, our home had found a rhythm again. A fragile rhythm, yes, but one I cherished. She would wake before I did, padding down the hallway in her quiet way, the soft thump of her socks brushing against the old wooden floor. Sometimes I could smell the faint scent of jasmine shampoo trailing behind her, the same kind she used when she was a girl, when life seemed simple and our bond felt unbreakable. I cooked breakfast like I always had. Not fancy meals, just warm ones. Scrambled eggs with a sprinkle of pepper, toast browned just enough to be crisp, tea with a spoon of honey stirred until it left swirls of gold in the cup. She rarely finished her plate, but she always said thank you. And I held on to those thank yous like they were proof that we were healing. We talked in small ways. About the weather, about the neighbor's noisy rooster, about the stray cat that kept coming to our porch and refusing to leave. But we never touched the deeper places, the ones filled with old wounds and unanswered questions. I thought time would guide us there gently, when we were ready. Sometimes, in the quiet afternoons, she would sit by the living room window scrolling through her phone, while I folded laundry on the couch. The sunlight would catch the side of her face, and for a moment, she looked like the little girl who used to climb into my lap and press her cheek against my chest. listening to my heartbeat, like it was a song made just for her. Those were the moments I breathed easier. But even then, small shadows followed us. When her phone buzzed, she would turn away quickly. When I asked how she was adjusting, she would shrug and say she was fine, but her voice carried a distance that felt colder than I remembered. Still, I chose hope. I chose to believe that love could soften anything. Even silence. Even hurt. Even the kind of misunderstanding that grows wild when left unattended for too long. I told myself that every family has its broken pieces, and if I held mine carefully enough, maybe, just maybe, they would fit together again. But there were hints I ignored. Small hesitations, lingering looks, nights when she stayed awake long after the house fell quiet, whispered calls, a tension that tightened around her shoulders like a rope she refused to loosen. I saw these things, and I pushed them aside. Because sometimes a mother wants so badly to believe in healing that she mistakes warning signs for growing pains. Those days felt almost peaceful, almost normal, almost enough to convince me we had survived the worst. I did not know the real storm was still coming, and it would not be brought by strangers or fate. It would be carried by my own child, wrapped inside a message she never meant for me to see. And when it arrived, it would unravel everything I thought I had mended. The first sign did not come loudly. It arrived quietly, like a hairline crack running across a glass you keep using until the day it finally breaks in your hand. It was late afternoon when I noticed it. The house was calm. The kind of calm that lets you hear the ticking of the kitchen clock and the soft hum of the refrigerator. My daughter had stepped out to meet a friend from her old school days. She said she would only be gone for a little while. I spent that time cleaning the living room, dusting the framed photos on the shelf. Our old family picture caught my attention. She was small in that photo, her smile wide and fearless, one hand gripping my arm as if nothing in the world could pull us apart. I traced my fingers over her younger face, feeling a small ache press behind my ribs. When I heard the front door open, I called out her name gently. No answer. Only the sound of hurried footsteps heading straight to her room. Something about the way she moved felt wrong. Tense. Almost guilty. Later, when I passed her room to bring fresh towels, I heard her speaking softly. Not soft like a whisper of affection. Soft like someone trying hard not to be heard. Her words were clipped, sharp in places. I froze, not meaning to eavesdrop, but her tone held a bitterness I had not heard since before she left home years ago. She stopped speaking the moment she sensed movement in the hallway. The silence that followed was thick enough to swallow breath. When I gently knocked on her door to hand her the towels, she opened it only a sliver, enough for her hand to slip through and nothing more. Her smile was polite, but her eyes did not match it. That was the first moment my heart gave a small, uneasy twist. Another sign came a few days later. We were having dinner together. A simple meal. Fried fish, steamed rice, pickled vegetables, food that tasted of home and comfort. She poked at her plate more than she ate, glancing at her phone every few moments. The screen lit her face with a pale glow, and each time it buzzed, she grew more agitated. At one point, she excused herself from the table so abruptly, her chair scraped loudly against the floor. I listened as she walked to the back porch, her voice rising, then dropping so low I could no longer catch any words. When she returned, her expression was tight as a clenched fist. I asked if everything was all right. She nodded. But the nod was too quick, too practiced. That night, while washing dishes, I noticed her phone left on the kitchen counter. The screen was face down, but a message preview had appeared just before she stepped away. I had not meant to read it. I had only meant to move the phone away from the edge where it might fall. But the words glowed up at me like a warning flame. She said she is almost ready. Just needs time to earn the woman's trust. My hand paused in midair, the dish soap slipping slowly down my wrist. My heart pounded so loudly I could hear it echoing in my ears. I told myself I must have misunderstood. I told myself it could be about anything, anyone. But a seed of fear sprouted quietly inside me, roots sinking deep even as I tried to deny it. The next sign was impossible to ignore. She had asked to borrow some money for new clothes to help her prepare for job interviews. I agreed, wanting to support her. But later that same week, I overheard her telling someone on the phone that she would have access to more soon. More. That word hung in the air long after she ended the call. More of what? More from whom? I did not want to believe she meant me. My heart refused to believe it. But a mother's intuition knows when danger sits too close. She became more secretive in the days that followed. more careful about where she left her phone, more distant when she spoke to me. She began staying out late and waking up with the smell of cigarette smoke in her hair, even though she claimed she had never touched a cigarette in her life. All the small details added up, forming a picture I tried desperately to unsee. Something was wrong, not with the world, not with fate, but with my own child, whose footsteps had once followed me everywhere like a loyal shadow. Now, her shadow felt colder, sharper, and pointed in a direction I was not ready to follow. I held on to hope like it was a rope keeping me from falling. Maybe I was imagining things. Maybe the old wounds between us had made me too cautious. Maybe she just needed time to grow comfortable again. But deep down, beneath all the hope and excuses, a quiet truth began whispering to me. There is a difference between a child who is healing and a child who is hiding something. And my daughter was hiding something from me. Something that would soon tear open everything I had tried so carefully to rebuild. The day everything broke began in an ordinary way. The kind of quiet day you never expect to remember for the rest of your life. Morning light sat gently on the kitchen table. The air smelled of coffee and toasted bread. The faucet dripped in a slow, steady rhythm, like a small clock counting breaths instead of seconds. My daughter had already eaten and gone back to her room, saying she was tired and wanted to lie down for a while. I moved through my usual chores, wiping counters, folding the dish towels, straightening the chairs around the table so their legs lined up neatly with the floor tiles. Sometimes, when life feels uncertain, your hands look for small things they can control. Her phone was on the table, face down, next to her half-finished cup of tea. A faint ring of moisture circled the bottom of the cup, already drying at the edges. I told myself I would move her phone to keep it safe from spills and nothing more. I reached toward it, my fingers still damp from rinsing a plate. As I picked it up, the screen lit beneath my touch. A new message had arrived just seconds before. My eyes caught the words before my mind had a chance to look away. You are right. She trusts me now. I will ruin her slowly. Take from her what she took from me. For a moment, everything inside me went silent. I did not hear the dripping faucet anymore. I did not feel the floor beneath my bare feet. My heart seemed to forget how to beat. Then came back all at once, pounding against my ribs so hard I thought I might be sick. I stared at the message, my thumb trembling above the glass. The contact name was saved with a simple first name I did not recognize. The tiny timestamp showed it had been sent just then, in that same peaceful morning when I had believed we were still fixing what had been broken. Ruin her slowly. The words tasted bitter in my mouth. They felt heavy, final, like a sentence handed down in a courtroom I never knew I had entered. I knew this message was about me. There was no one else here she needed to win the trust of. No one else who had taken something so important in her eyes that she felt justified in speaking of ruin. My first instinct was denial. Maybe I was misreading. Maybe this conversation was about someone else. But the more I tried to twist the meaning into something softer, the clearer it became. She was talking about me, the daughter I had carried in my arms, the child whose cries I had soothed in the dark of so many nights, had come back home not for love, not for healing, but with a plan to hurt me. I felt my hand go cold around the phone. My breath came shallow and sharp. Each inhale scraped the inside of my chest like glass. More messages appeared as I stood there frozen, unable to set the phone down. She does not even question it. The next line read. She just gives and gives. Money, favors, trust. It will be easy. Another message arrived. She will learn what it feels like to lose everything. The room tilted just enough to make me grab the back of the chair beside me. I pressed my palm flat against the wooden frame and closed my eyes for a moment. The phone still glowing in my other hand. This could not be my child. Not the girl who once clung to my skirt when she was scared. Not the teenager who shouted terrible words at me the day she left but still wore the bracelet I had given her on her 15th birthday. Not the woman who had walked through my front door weeks ago with tired eyes and a suitcase that looked too light. I wanted to set the phone down and pretend I had never seen those messages. I wanted to step back into the lie that felt safer than this new truth. But truth, once seen so clearly, does not step aside just because we ask it to. As I stood there, the floor creaked softly behind me. What are you doing with my phone? My daughter asked. Her voice was flat. Not curious, not afraid. Just flat. I turned around, slowly, the phone still in my hand. In that moment, I saw something in her eyes I had been trying not to name. Resentment. Calculation. A deep old anger that had not faded with time, only sharpened. Your phone buzzed, I said. I was just moving it away from the cup. She stepped closer, her gaze dropping to the screen. Her face changed in an instant. The mask slipped. Her lips tightened, the muscles in her jaw working as she clenched her teeth. "You read it," she said. It was not a question. It was an accusation. For a second, I considered lying. I considered saying that I had not seen anything at all. But I have lived too long and lost too much to build anything new on top of a fresh lie. "Yes," I said quietly. "I saw the messages." Silence spread between us. The house seemed to lean in, listening. She reached out a hand for the phone. I did not move. My fingers curled around it more tightly, as if letting go would mean surrendering the last piece of evidence that I was not losing my mind. "Ruin me slowly," I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. "That is what you told them." Her eyes flashed. Near the window, the curtain stirred with a small breeze, brushing against the glass like it wanted to escape. "You have no right to go through my phone," she snapped. "And you have no right to come into my home with a plan to destroy me." I answered, my own voice trembling but steady. For the first time since she returned, the surface of politeness between us cracked wide open. The anger in her rose quickly, too quickly, as if she had been waiting for this moment. "You destroyed me first," she said. "You think you are so innocent. You think you are some kind of saint for forgiving me and letting me come back. You never even admitted what you did." I felt the sting of those words, but I also felt a deep, familiar confusion. What I did. A memory flickered. The last big fight before she left. The accusations she threw at me through tears. The money she believed I had kept from her. The choices I made to protect her from someone she trusted blindly. Choices I had never fully explained, because she would not listen, and I was too proud to beg her to hear me. I thought time had softened that anger. I thought it had faded in the struggle of her own life out there in the world. Instead, she had carried it like a burning coal, held close to her chest, waiting for the day she could press it into my skin. "You never even told me the truth," she continued, her voice rising. "You just decided for me. You took everything. Then you expect me to be grateful for some leftovers of your love." My throat tightened. "You think ruining me will fix that?" I asked. "You think hurting me will heal you?" She laughed. A short, bitter sound that did not belong in the same air where she once giggled over silly cartoons and bedtime stories. "I think you deserve to lose something for once," she said. "I think you deserve to know how it feels." Her words landed like blows I could not block. Each sentence cut deeper than the one before. Not because of their cleverness, but because they came from the mouth of my own child. I looked at her, really looked, past the anger, past the tight shoulders, and clenched fists. Underneath it all, I saw a wounded young woman who had wrapped herself so tightly in her pain that she could no longer tell where the hurt ended, and she began. My voice came out softer than I expected. "So you came back to take my money, my peace, my name, all because of something you never allowed me to explain." Her eyes wavered, just for a moment, as if the word explain had brushed against some buried curiosity. Then she pushed it away. "We are done talking," she said. "Give me my phone." I handed it to her, not because I wanted to, but because I understood something important. The truth of who she had become was not trapped inside that object. It was standing right in front of me. As she snatched the phone from my hand, our fingers touched briefly. Her skin was cold. She turned and walked back to her room, the door closing with a soft, deliberate click. I remained in the kitchen. The light had shifted. Shadows stretched longer across the floor. The tea in her cup had gone completely cold. In that quiet, with the clock ticking its patient rhythm on the wall, I let myself feel the full weight of what I had just learned. My daughter had not come home to heal with me. She had come home to hurt me. And if I wanted to survive this without losing myself, I would have to face not only her anger, but the truth of my own past choices, and the secrets that had been left rotting between us for far too many years. After the door closed behind her, I stayed in the kitchen long enough for the sunlight to fade into a dull gray. My hands were still resting on the back of the chair, but I no longer felt its shape. I only felt the slow unraveling of the ground beneath my feet. I had always believed that a mother's love could endure anything. But that morning, standing alone in that quiet house, I understood that even love has limits. Not in its capacity to forgive, but in its capacity to survive being wounded by the very person it protects. I spent the first hour doing nothing but breathing. Slow breaths, shallow breaths, then deeper ones, until the ache in my chest loosened just enough for my mind to start working again. I did not want revenge. I did not want to see my daughter suffer. What I wanted was something far older and far simpler. I wanted safety. I wanted clarity. I wanted the truth. And the truth, as sharp as it was, demanded that I open my eyes fully. I walked to the living room and sat in my old armchair, the one that had molded itself to my shape over the years. The fabric felt familiar beneath my fingertips, grounding me. I needed that grounding, because everything else felt like shifting sand. I replayed her words in my mind. You took everything. You never told me the truth. You deserved to lose something for once. Each sentence pointed back to the same wound she had been carrying since the day she walked out of my life. A wound born from misunderstanding, twisted further by the wrong people whispering in her ear. I had avoided explaining the full truth back then. She was too angry to hear me. I was too exhausted to fight. We let silence take the place of conversation, and silence became the soil where resentment grew wild and uncontested. But now that resentment had shape, intent, a plan. She would ruin me slowly. If I wanted to stop her without destroying whatever small chance of reconciliation remained, I needed to act with intention, not fear. That night, after she fell asleep, I sat at the dining table with a notebook. The ticking clock kept me company, each tick a reminder that hesitation could cost me everything. I wrote down 3 things. First, I needed to understand exactly what she believed I had taken from her. Second, I needed to protect myself in case her plans had already moved further than I realized. Third, I needed to uncover who she was talking to and why that person encouraged her anger instead of helping her heal. None of this would be easy, but I had lived long enough to know that the hardest conversations are the ones that save us. The next step was to watch, quietly, carefully, without provoking her. Over the next few days, I observed her patterns. When she made calls, when she left the house, how she reacted whenever money or trust was mentioned. I noticed she grew especially tense whenever she received messages from the same contact. There was a night she stayed out late, coming home long after the streetlights had turned the road silver. I waited by the living room window, pretending to read a book I could not focus on. When she entered, she avoided my eyes. She seemed bothered by something, or perhaps emboldened. I could not tell. "Are you all right?" I asked, my tone gentle. She nodded without meeting my gaze and disappeared into her room. A cold certainty settled inside me. Whatever she was planning, it was moving forward. I knew then that I had to speak with her. Not in anger, not in accusation, but in truth. The next morning, I knocked on her door. She opened it just enough to look at me. "We need to talk," I said. She crossed her arms. "About what?" "The past." Her eyes narrowed, suspicion flickering like a small flame. "Why now?" she asked. "Because I think you deserve to know what really happened," I replied. "Not the version you remember through anger. Not the version someone else told you. The truth. From me." Calmly. Completely. For a moment, something in her face shifted. Confusion, maybe. Or curiosity. A long silence stretched between us until she stepped back slightly. "Fine. Talk." We sat at the kitchen table. I folded my hands to keep them from trembling. "You always believed I kept that money from you," I began slowly. "You believed I chose to hurt you. But the truth was different. The truth was that the man you trusted had a history of using young women for money and favors. I learned from someone else he planned to take advantage of you. I acted to protect you, not to betray you." Her expression hardened. "That is not true," she said. "He told me you were jealous, controlling, that you wanted my life to be miserable so I would depend on you forever." I felt her words like a cold hand squeezing my heart. I looked her in the eyes. "He lied to you. You were too young to know the signs, too in love to see his intentions. But I saw. I heard things. I still have proof." She flinched, a small flicker of uncertainty breaking through her anger. "If I wanted to control you," I continued softly, "why would I have opened my home to you now? Why would I have forgiven you the moment you knocked on the door? Why would I still be sitting here, trying to explain, instead of pushing you away?" She opened her mouth, but no words came. The anger in her eyes wavered, flickering like a light struggling to stay alive. "I know you are hurting," I said. "I know you feel like I took something from you. But coming here with a plan to ruin me will not heal that hurt. It will only break you further." Her breathing grew shallow. Her fingers tightened around the edge of the table. "Who told you I was planning anything?" she whispered. I paused. "I read the message," I said gently. the one you meant for someone else. Her face drained of color. For the first time, true fear flickered in her eyes. She stood abruptly, knocking her chair back. "You had no right," she said, her voice shaking. "Maybe I did not," I answered. "But a mother will always choose truth over being polite when the safety of her home is at risk." She looked away, her jaw tight, her chest rising and falling rapidly. The truth had cornered her, and she did not know how to escape it. I spoke softly. "I love you. That has never changed. But love cannot survive in a house where someone is plotting harm. If you want this to work, you must tell me everything. Who you were talking to, what they told you, and why you believed hurting me was the only way to heal yourself." Tears gathered in her eyes, though she fought them. "You do not understand what he said about you," she whispered. "You do not know what I have believed for years." "Then tell me," I said. "I am here. I am listening." Her shoulders sagged just a little, not enough to be surrender, but enough to show her anger was no longer the only thing holding her upright. But before she could speak, her phone buzzed loudly on the table. The same contact, the same name, the same shadow behind every broken word she had spoken. She looked at the phone, then at me. Torn between two worlds, she could no longer keep separate. In that fragile moment, I realized something important. The truth was no longer just between her and me. It was bigger, deeper. It involved someone else who had been feeding her resentment for years. And if the truth was going to come out, it would not stay inside our home. The outside world would soon see everything. The moment her phone buzzed on the table, everything inside the room shifted. It was as if the truth itself had walked in and taken a seat beside us, refusing to be ignored any longer. My daughter stared at the glowing screen, her fingers trembling, her eyes filled with the kind of fear a person feels when their lies begin to slip from their grasp. "Answer it," I said softly. She shook her head. "He will not stop," she whispered. "He says I owe him answers." "Who is he?" She closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, her voice came out thin. "A man I used to talk to when things were bad. He told me everything you did was intentional, that you wanted to ruin my life, that you wanted me small and dependent so you could feel powerful." My heart broke in quiet pieces. This stranger had slipped into the space between us, feeding her the story she was already half convinced to believe. And now that story was shaping her every choice. Her phone buzzed again, louder this time. Without thinking, she reached for it, but I placed my hand gently over hers. "Do not run from this anymore," I said. She hesitated. Then she pulled her hand away, stood up, and walked to her room. The door closed behind her, leaving me alone in the kitchen with the weight of a truth too big to keep inside the walls of our home. That evening, the public part of everything began. It started when my neighbor Mrs. Land came by to return a casserole dish. Her timing, as always, was uncanny. She noticed my daughter's red-rimmed eyes as the girl passed through the living room, heading outside to take a call. "Your girl looks troubled," she whispered to me after the door closed. Troubled was a soft word for it. My daughter's voice rose outside, sharp enough to cut through the quiet street. The neighbors walking their dogs paused, glancing over. Curtains shifted ever so slightly from nearby houses. The whole neighborhood had a way of noticing things without ever saying they noticed them. I heard her say his name through the thin walls. A name I recognized. A name belonging to a man who had caused harm before. A man known for manipulating young women with sympathy that turned into control. He was the one poisoning her. He was the one feeding her the story that had turned her against me. He was the one encouraging her plan to ruin her own mother. The door swung open and she came back inside, shaking. "He told me to get the money from you before the end of the week," she said, her voice cracking. "He said if I did not, he would expose everything I told him. Every secret, every mistake." Her words felt like a punch. So I was not just a target. She was, too. This man was using her pain to fill his pockets, using her anger to control her, using her confusion to drag her deeper into a darkness she mistook for loyalty. "We need to go to the police," I said quietly. She looked at me with shock. "No. If we do that, he will tell everyone what I said about you. He will show them the messages. Everyone will think I am a monster." I stepped closer and touched her arm. "If we stay silent, you hand him your life on a silver platter. You hand him mine too." She collapsed into a chair, burying her face in her hands. And that was the moment the world outside started pressing in without mercy. The next day, Mrs. Land returned. She had overheard enough on the porch that night to understand something serious was happening. And she, being who she was, could not keep it to herself. By the afternoon, 2 more neighbors came by with groceries they did not need us to have, asking gentle questions they pretended were casual. By evening, word had spread through our small community that trouble had returned to my home just as quickly as my daughter had. The turning point came when my daughter's old school teacher stopped by, a kind older woman with silver hair and gentle eyes. She had heard whispers and came purely out of worry. My daughter broke the moment she saw her. Tears poured down her face as she confessed more than I expected. Not everything, but enough. Enough for the teacher to understand that someone was influencing her, exploiting her, manipulating her grief and resentment for his own gain. The teacher looked at me with sorrow and said words that felt like both comfort and truth. She is hurting, but she is not lost. Hurt people sometimes become dangerous to themselves before they become dangerous to others. My daughter pressed her forehead against the edge of the table and sobbed. The teacher placed a gentle hand on her shoulder. "You must stop talking to that man," she said firmly. "You must tell the truth before the truth destroys the both of you." I stood beside them, my hand lightly resting on my daughter's back, an unspoken promise that despite everything, I was still her mother. But the public consequences did not end in my living room. The following day, the man she had been speaking to called from an unknown number. This time, I answered. A deep voice spoke with a poisonous sweetness. "Tell your daughter she owes me. And if she does not pay, everyone will find out what she planned to do to you." For the first time since this began, I felt anger rise in me. Not the kind that shouts. The kind that stands tall. "You will not get another cent from her," I said, my voice steady. "And if you come near my family again, I will make sure the authorities know everything." He laughed. "Then let the world know what she is really like." I ended the call. Slowly, calmly. But my neighbors, my daughter's teacher, even the postman who had paused outside, they all saw the tension in our home. And they all began to understand that the real villain was not the girl who had returned to her mother's house, but the man who had infected her heart with bitterness. As the truth spread quietly through our community, people began offering their support. Small gestures. A warm meal. A soft word. A knowing look that said they understood more than we realized. Meanwhile, my daughter avoided leaving the house. The shame of what she had nearly done weighed on her shoulders like a heavy coat she could not take off. The public consequence was not loud or cruel. It was quieter, softer, but powerful. People knew, people saw, people understood. And sometimes, knowing that others see your truth is enough to force you to face it yourself. The days that followed were quiet in a way that felt different from normal silence. It was not the calm absence of sound. It was the thick, heavy quiet that settles after a storm, when the air still trembles from what has passed and everything feels fragile enough to crack beneath a whisper. My daughter stayed inside most of the time. She moved slowly through the house, as if each step carried the weight of everything she had done and almost done. She avoided my eyes at first. Her guilt hung around her like a shadow she did not know how to escape. I gave her space. Not because I did not want answers, but because pressure would only push her deeper into shame. And shame, once it digs its roots in too deeply, has a way of turning into anger all over again. One evening, while I was folding laundry, she walked into the living room. Her posture was tight, her hands twisting together nervously. I could sense what was coming, the way a mother senses a shift before a child speaks. She sat across from me, her gaze fixed on the floor. "I was wrong," she whispered. The words were soft, trembling at the edges, like a confession carried too long inside her chest. I set the towel down gently. She took a shaky breath. "I believed him because I needed someone to blame," she said. "I was young and angry, and everything felt like it was falling apart. He said things that fit what I wanted to hear, things that made me feel like none of my mistakes were really mine." I nodded slowly, letting her speak at her own pace. "I thought you ruined my life," she continued. "I thought you were controlling me. I thought you took that money because you wanted to punish me. And when he told me you deserved to be hurt, a part of me believed it." Her voice cracked on that last sentence. I leaned back in my chair, not to distance myself, but to give her room to breathe. "I was so ready to see you as the enemy," she said, wiping her eyes with the back of her sleeve, "that I never saw how he was using me. I let him shape my anger without question. And when I came back home, I wanted to pretend I was here to fix things. But really, I came here angry, confused, and I let him convince me that hurting you was the only way I could take back my life. She covered her face with her hands and cried. Not the sharp, explosive cries she used to have as a teenager. These were quieter, heavier, as if each tear came from a deeper place. I moved to the couch beside her and placed my hand gently over her back. She did not pull away. That alone felt like the first step toward healing. When her crying slowed, I spoke with a calm I did not know I still possessed. I am your mother, I said softly. I have made mistakes. I have made decisions you did not understand. And I am sorry you felt I hurt you. Truly sorry. But I never wanted to ruin you. I never wanted to take anything from you. Everything I did back then was to keep you safe from someone who did not care about you the way you thought. She looked up at me with swollen eyes. I see that now, she whispered. A moment passed between us, gentle, fragile like the first light after a long night. The next day, she called the man who had manipulated her, not to argue, not to beg, but to end it. I stood in the hallway as she spoke, her voice steady for the first time in a long while. Do not call me again, she said. Do not threaten me. Do not talk about my mother. Do not pretend you care about my life. I am done. She ended the call without waiting for a response and blocked his number. That night, she sat with me on the porch. The air smelled of damp earth from the recent rain. Crickets hummed in steady rhythms. She pulled her knees up to her chest and rested her chin on them. I want to get help, she said. I need to understand why I let someone twist me like that. I need to fix myself. Not for you, but because I cannot live like this anymore. Her voice was soft but determined. I reached over and took her hand. Healing does not come in a straight line, I told her. It comes in small moments, quiet realizations, difficult conversations, and forgiveness real. Forgiveness begins with understanding. She nodded, tears welling again. But these tears carried something gentler than before. In the weeks that followed, she started seeing a counselor at a community center. She deleted every contact of people who had fed her anger. She spent time journaling, cooking with me, helping with errands. These were small things, but I could see the shift in her eyes. The bitterness was fading, replaced by something softer. Trust did not return overnight. But trust built slowly is often stronger than trust assumed. One afternoon, she asked if she could help repaint the living room. It was her idea of making a fresh start. As we worked side by side, dipping brushes into pale cream paint, I realized something. The home felt lighter, and so did we. She talked about her fears, her regrets, and the confusion she felt when she was caught between her hurt and that man's manipulation. I listened, not to defend myself, not to correct her, but simply to hear her. The healing between us grew not from excuses or justifications, but from understanding and honesty. Little by little, the wound between mother and daughter began to close. Not because the past vanished, but because we faced it together. By the end of the month, she smiled more often. She slept better. She no longer jumped whenever her phone buzzed, because it buzzed less and less with the voices of those who harmed her. She once stood by the kitchen window and said quietly, I almost lost you, and I almost lost myself. I stepped beside her and touched her shoulder. You came back, I said, and you chose to stay for the right reasons. That matters more than anything. She leaned into me, her head resting lightly against my arm, and for the first time since she returned home, she felt like my daughter again. Not the wounded version shaped by others, not the angry version who wanted revenge, but the girl I raised, standing at the edge of becoming a stronger woman. Our healing was not perfect, but it was real, and it was enough. When I look back on everything that happened, I do not see only the pain. I see the different versions of my daughter trying to survive in a world that was not always kind to her. I see the mistakes I made when I thought silence would protect us. I see the cracks where resentment grew because neither of us knew how to speak our truth without fear of being misunderstood. But I also see healing. Not perfect healing. Not quick healing. The kind that comes slowly, like sunlight creeping across a dark room. The kind that comes from choosing honesty instead of pride, compassion instead of anger, and courage instead of silence. There were moments I thought our relationship was beyond repair. There were days I wanted to give up and close my door forever. But love, real love, asks for patience. And healing, real healing, asks for honesty. My daughter has changed, not into someone new, but into someone more herself. Someone stronger, Someone willing to face the parts of her heart she once tried to hide. And I have changed too. I learned that even mothers must speak their truth, even when it trembles. I learned that forgiveness is not a doorway for others to hurt you again. Forgiveness is a gentle path you choose for your own peace. If you are listening to my story right now, maybe you have been hurt by someone you love. Maybe you are carrying a scar that still aches when touched by memory. Or maybe you are standing at the edge of forgiveness, unsure whether to step forward or turn away. Let me ask you something, gently, like a friend sitting beside you in the quiet. If someone you love hurt you deeply, would you have given them another chance? Would you have opened your door again? Would you have had the courage to face the truth, even when the truth trembled inside your hands? I would love to hear your heart in the comments. And if my story touched you, inspired you, or made you think differently about forgiveness and family, I hope you will stay with me for more stories. Your support keeps these stories alive, and your presence reminds me that none of us walks through healing alone. Thank you for listening. Thank you for sitting with me through the storm. And thank you for choosing kindness, even when kindness feels difficult.